Today is day 6 of the November 89 7-day retreat in Springwater. Since very likely we will be reading during tomorrow's talk, and I have a whole handful of questions left, I will do what I did. I think I reported about it, what I did in Germany, reading all the questions, and then maybe finding which one to start with. Weaving them together, we'll see. You talk about not being afraid of dying. Do you have a belief in something after death? When people are oppressed and degraded, like the Jews were in Germany and the blacks are in this country, isn't there the need for an image of self-importance? Or some kind of positive self-image to get one through or to live by. When you talked about the earthquake with nothing stable to hold on, I was wondering what gives us the sense of stability that we think we have. I'm trying to decide what to do with my life. What worked? I'm not laughing at the person. Nice to laugh together. We all wonder that, don't we? It's a moment we think about. What to do with my life? What work to do? What would I like best? What is most meaningful, most significant or helpful? And then I'm also wondering, is there any freedom of choice? Nature is violent. Animals are violently killing other animals, living on killing other animals. There's violence in the competition among trees for light and sun and food, and other trees are stunted. Maybe a violent crashing down of a tree. There are violent earthquakes. So what's wrong with violence? You seem to condemn violence, or there seems to be a feeling in you that violence is not good. What is wrong with violence in human beings, or violence in general? You speak about looking at anger directly or looking at fear directly. Does that mean to keep thinking angry or fearful or resentment-producing thoughts? Do you mean to keep on with the thinking when you say stay with it? I feel a deep sadness in me and around me, and often I'm unable to distinguish whether the sadness I'm feeling is my own or someone else's. Until I see clearly for myself, don't I have to believe someone who sounds true, who is something of an authority? Is there any way of being compassionate really compassionate, say in the midst of a ward of AIDS patients, or doing inner city work, being with these people, taking care of them, without being totally sucked into their suffering. Becoming totally absorbed in someone else's suffering. Caught up in it, that's what the person meant. Suffering in oneself. Let's first talk about this question of, does being with anger or fear mean continuing with angry or fear-producing thoughts? Because we have talked at great length about being with fear and said at the time the same way, the same being with applies to anything, including anger, pain, any state of being, which we talked at great detail and depth in a previous talk or talks. And let me sound a warning. Nothing that is said here means this is a method, try to follow it. And in talking about being with fear, we're doing it together. This being there is happening right at the moment of talking. It's not mentioned as a method to follow out there. To answer this question, to come to some understanding of it, one has to see for oneself what the continued thinking of anger-producing or fear-producing thoughts affects throughout the body, and retroactively throughout the brain and through the body and brain. The whole cycle of thinking fearful or angry thoughts, the bodily symptoms manifesting, and from that more thoughts issuing. Judgmental thoughts, thoughts of escape, not liking it. And with that, the production of conflict in the body with what it has just produced. I guess the example this morning in a meeting, it's like an irritated parent sometimes telling a child something to do something, out of already a state of anger, irritation, telling the child to do something, and then being angry at the child for what he's done. Already forgetting that one has told. Just continuing with the thoughts, and then being in conflict with the result. So, can there be a growing understanding, a realization of this cycle of thoughts, physical manifestations, the discomfort with them, more thoughts, more conflict, and then again back to the anger-producing thoughts, because the incident is so magnetic, attracts thoughts, or issues thoughts. And wondering, why do these thoughts continue if they in fact do continue? Because we're not advocating any kind of control mechanism to stop them. Just to look at them. And sometimes when the looking is right there, without any goal in mind, just seeing intelligently what's going on, maybe to one's amazement the thoughts stop, the cycle is interrupted, it's ended in the looking. If that looking is intelligent and sees what this is producing and has been producing and will continue to produce, and that understanding can only come if one has observed it. not just once, but many times in oneself and each other. Because it's the same processes at work in each human being. They're not different. The content of the thoughts may be different. The incident may vary. What angers one person doesn't anger another one. But what angers that other person may not anger the first person. Fear, the same thing. So our fears and anger-producing things vary, but the process does not vary. Only slightly. Insofar as physiologically even, no two people are completely, totally alike. So there comes a moment where one realizes, if I keep thinking these thoughts, there will just be more upset, more anger, more resentment, more fear. Or not I keep thinking, there's no thinker there if these thoughts continue running. So can there be this unfolding of an intelligent awareness, understanding? All the while not repressing what the body has dutifully supplied in terms of chemicals and reactions. Not be at odds with that. It's been demanded, called upon to act in certain ways, to respond in certain ways. And why be at odds with that? Because we don't understand it. We just don't like the feeling and therefore condemn the feeling or judge it or say it's bad. Try to fight it. Fight something that is the unfathomable workings of this body in the presence of danger, anger, fear, to produce what it takes to run away or fight or freeze. It's not new on this earth with human beings. It dates back to our whole animal ancestry. These mechanisms. Only animals don't sit in an office when a danger signal arises in the mind. They are on the pasture and they run. Or if cornered, attack. Or maybe play dead. We sitting in an office, these ways of using up what has been aroused don't exist. So then one sits there stewing in misery. But with intelligent understanding, there can be a real appreciation of what the body is doing and not bother it in its activity and let it come to rest, which it also does very intelligently. Comes back to balance, unless this has happened so often that something has degenerated or it has become diseased through an overdose of certain chemicals or whatever. I'm not trying to become medical here, I sound. And so I understood this very deeply. I only talk from observation. And this is all observable to an interested observer. Interested but not judgmental, not fighting or vowing to overcome. And with that the observer ends, because that's what the observer is. Judgment, fight, disgust, or grasping. Maybe here the next question comes in, whether I condemn violence, think it's not good. A person said, I can tell when you talk about it that you feel it's not good in yourself. I feel violence is not good. What about the violence in nature? With a question like this, one can sort of do some inquiry, research into oneself, whence this question arises. And very often with a question such as this, one may find that one wants to justify something as being inevitable or inherent in us because we are part of nature. Or one wants to bring everything, as we say in German, under one hat, the hat of acceptance, so that one can feel more at ease with what is going on, not necessarily that one self-condones violence, but one doesn't want to think badly about anything. And the question is asked very often. Also, I've heard other speakers, people, the Buddhist speakers, Krishnamurti, often were asked this question, well, what about nature being violent? Doesn't it follow then that we are too, and to accept that? What about animals killing for food, for feeding themselves and their young? So there are a lot of nature programs on these days, some really magnificently filmed on site in the habitat, in the natural habitat. So one gets to see the natural habitat and the animals photographed at great distance from hidden places so they don't feel observed. And a great part of these movies is how an animal kills another. One wonders sometimes whether the proportion of time that act takes is proportionate to the life of the animal. Is it already that the photographer, or selling this thing to a network, goes a little bit after what is most appealing or interesting or exciting to people? Because very often it takes a long time, this dwelling on this. The animal killing and devouring whole and whatever. The animal, the prey. But it's not all the picture shows, and since this is a vital part of the life of the animal, it should be shown, it shouldn't be avoided. But I haven't seen any scenes of animals killing for fun, for sport, for entertainment. And the fights over territory or sexual rivalry rarely end in the death or even serious injury of one animal. There seems to be some kind of intelligence that stops short of that, where the animal withdraws, the one that's defeated, that's the weaker of the two. And then, as we've often mentioned here, the weaker of the two does not go and rally allies to come back. Doesn't use a symbol to get allies. The animal brain doesn't function this way. Doesn't have this room for symbolism, for remembrance, for rallying cries, for invading en masse with weapons or so. And so the violence is brief, usually. A brief moment, and then it's finished, and then the prey and the predator maybe share the same waterhole. The hunger being satiated, there is no image left of this being an enemy whom one should attack or shun. Because we've just witnessed over television and news a violent earthquake, 3 in a row of a week or so, here in China and someplace else. Violent eruptions of volcanoes, where the ashes and the lava just killed everything it comes in touch with: trees, animals, buildings, people. But all of these happenings don't happen out of thought, with an intention to be violent, to kill, to maim, to torture, to capture slaves or prisoners. This only has appeared on this earth with the coming into being of a large enough brain to think those things out, to remember and to project, to imagine, to invent weapons and ideas of grandeur, of what one could own for oneself, including human beings, whom one can imagine and actually take with one. The kings used to take their whole retinue into the grave. It was so ordained that if the king dies, everybody goes into the grave alive with him. This is only possible with imagination. Is this natural? I don't know what the word means really as far as human beings are concerned. Is thought natural? It evolved in nature. So its activities logically can be called natural. But at the point one is doing this, why is one doing it? Is one trying to rationalize something? Accept something? And in that rationalization and acceptance, avoid looking at it intelligently. By intelligently, I mean wondering whether it has to be this way, whether it has to continue this way. Not just intelligently, but compassionately. Whether human beings have to be fought, killed, maimed, tortured, or whether anger in oneself has to take over again and again and again because it's natural to get angry or to be enraged, to condemn people, manipulate them or beat them down verbally, physically. We all have this potential or actually do that, particularly when we have some position of power with children or with people who work for one. Then these propensities and potentials may go into action because we have suffered violence at the hands of superiors and parents. All of us have. We've gone into that quite recently in a talk. There are scars, and these scars in the human brain don't remain quiet. They say, revenge. Do to others as is done unto yourself, or has been done unto yourself. Not thinking this out, it works that way. It operates this way, and for that there has to be a non-accepting, non-condemning insight into one's moment-to-moment happenings, in alone and in relationship with other people. We talked, I think, yesterday about the endless continuation of this chain of revenge, hurt and revenge and hurt and revenge and revenge and hurt. And the question does come up, doesn't it? Does this have to keep going this way? Or can there be an ending at one point? An ending, not perpetuating this. And this ending can only happen in oneself, one individual human being. If we try to end something in someone else, we get into trouble. Because then we try to tackle what we don't want to look at in ourselves, in someone else. Most of the time, at least. So, given this incredible brain, with its incredible capacities, and brain experts tell us that we are only using a small part of the brain, large areas which aren't even used. How are we going to proceed? Realizing how we have proceeded in the past, up to this moment. Krishnamurti has always asked very boldly, can there be a mutation in the brain? That there is a mutation in the brain cells themselves. Maybe divesting themselves of remembered content. Not carrying that for generations, which we do. We pass our grudges to our children and incite them to fight for the land, the motherland or the fatherland. And the mutation, not the brain is part of the whole body. A change in the whole flow of energy, which normally, when left to its conditioned self, flows into all of these ancient patterns, energizes them, and they run. Can there be a change in the flow of energy? Gathering in awareness rather than energizing all the ancient patterns of grudge and ambition, hierarchy. Hierarchy is already in animals, pecking order. Territorialism, sexual rivalry. And the amazing thing is these things can actually be seen as they happen. Or as they happen, because if awareness sets in, it sheds light on what just happened. Because what has been aroused in the body is going on, but a thought may end at that moment. And the thought has incited, of course, continues till the body reestablishes balance. So one can see quite clearly, can't one, that any rationalization aids in try to a sort of painting over something or fogging over. We don't need rationalizations to look. They hinder looking. We don't need excuses. We don't need to find fault with ourselves either, because then comes the rash of guilt, and guilt clouds the mind. Like resentment, anger, or fear do, so does guilt cloud the mind. The mind needs to be clear to look at violence in oneself, rage. One person was reporting that, and sitting more at ease in this retreat than in other retreats, more relaxed, and incredibly violent and angry fantasies arising in the mind. It's not just the surface mind to this mind. There are deep layers that we call unconscious layers. But unconscious they are because they are not paid attention to. But they come into awareness when this our usual habitual censorship. This is bad, I'm not like that, I shouldn't be like that. When that is relaxing, then these deeper layers of consciousness come into awareness, sometimes by bits and pieces or dreams, fantasies. What to do with them? To look at them, to see it. Doesn't need to be immediately busily interpreted. Then the interpreter is at work. And the interpreter is part of this whole thing, part of this whole unconscious human mind, not just human. So, will we look and not look away? Not find refuge in an image? Even though it's painful to see one's images about oneself in shambles. But it's only painful if one thinks about it. If one doesn't think about it, then the clarity of seeing without images brings its own joy and energy. And with this, aren't we getting to this other question? People like the Jews in Germany, or minority groups in this country, in inner cities, in ghettos, don't they need, and the person works with children, don't these children need some sense of importance? Don't they need the building up of a self-image in order to weather all of this degradation, humiliation? I don't think we should have any conclusions of what somebody needs. If we do work in the inner city, which is admirable, I have that courage to do that, can one find out about each other first of all? Sometimes on television, seeing these children, often sort of bubbling out of an empty doorway. You may not even see an adult around. Mother may be off to work someplace to get some money. And sometimes if you see an adult, that adult face looks grim, sorrowful, worried, or angry. Don't these children above all need love? Someone there, not just being pushed around. Isn't that the first thing we all need? And can we give that? Is that there in us? Okay, I walk in there with the idea I have to start building a self-image in this child. Where does that come from? And I'm not saying that's what the person meant. There was a great deal of sensitivity and compassion in that person. A great deal of feeling. And wanting to help. The same person who had that question is it possible to work there without taking on all of this suffering and being crushed by it, and therefore rendered ineffective in the work? So if one works in the inner city with minorities or on an AIDS ward with AIDS patients, how do we meet each other wherever we're working? At home with our own family, with our friends or co-workers on the workplace. How do we meet each other? Do we at times look at each other as human beings? Not just as we remember about each other, or want from each other, or are afraid of, because of what you remind me of or what you did to me yesterday or a week ago. Can, wherever we are with each other, there be a little sprout? We used to sprout alfalfa. It's such a tiny little thing. And the little white things come in, two little green tips, or one tip of affection. Or the German word is Zuneigung, meaning leaning toward each other. Meaning listening to each other, feeling not just what I feel about you, but what do you feel about me? How did I come on? How did I sound? There comes a point in listening and awareness where one can hear how one sounds, and one may be appalled. Because one thought one is kindly, friendly, generous, so forth. These are all ideas. One has to hear how one sounds when one says something. And not have the idea I should sound friendly. Because I don't say one shouldn't have this. The way I sometimes put things, one gathers it up as a new series of do's and don'ts, and I don't mean that at all, even though I sound that way. All I'm wondering is, can one listen to oneself and to each other in a new way, not based on image? Important image, unimportant image, let go of them if possible. Or see that they're there and see what a blockage they are. If the blockage is seen, it begins to crack. And let some air and light through the crack. So this question, this frequent question, don't we need a strong, good self-image before we can let go of it? I think that's too theoretical a question. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what we need to be loving and caring, compassionate and intelligent. But I have some feeling for what gets in the way of that, some insight into it. And maybe it's a matter of if this isn't pursued and that isn't pursued and this is seen through and this drops off because it's seen for what it is and doesn't hold anymore. Maybe with this and this gone, maybe something comes into being without any need or any cause. It has nothing to do with self-image. It's free of self. Therefore, it does function intelligently and compassionately because it is free of self, free of the whole racial, collective, whatever unconscious. That's there, but it doesn't come into play. It's not energized. It's not activated in awareness, which is active, seeing, acting. Asking, particularly, it came up a couple of times about the Jews. Didn't they need some feeling of self-importance to get out of this horrendous fate there and of being almost wiped out by the millions? The Jewish people that I've known quite a few, did not lack in feeling of self-importance. And my my early acquaintanceship, not through religion, but through being given picture books, one of them being a picture book of the Old Testament. The chosen people was on every page. The image of being the chosen people. Isn't there self-image? And that's what has kept Jewish people going through all of this persecution. It's also probably had to do with the persecution, but who wants to have somebody around who calls themselves chosen? I'm the chosen one, not them. And has one learned, I don't want to pick on the Jewish people, I want to pick on anyone because we're all incriminated in this. Have we learned from Holocaust, wars, being beaten down, being almost killed? Or do we quickly build up the self-image after the humiliation, the country image, and then go to fight to enlarge our country, to punish our adversaries in the name of our symbols, our flags, our religious symbols? What are we without them? Without flag, without symbol, without identity. I mean, taking pride in being a professional, a doctor, whatever. Do we need image? Do the children in the ghetto need image, or do they need trees and grass? And a playground? Nice teachers? Good schools? And I don't mean good in terms of all the education that's going to be pumped into them, but interesting things to do. Kyle, my husband, who was a teacher, he said he really can't say he ever had a child who wasn't interested in learning, finding out something. Not in order to become a learner, the best learner that we impose upon the system, but because there's interest in finding out. And the less our grading interferes with that interest, the more the interest will remain alive for the sake of doing what one is doing. And that goes for children and adults. We think we need to become somebody in our minds and in the minds of others, but what we need to do is do what we love to do. You can say, wait a minute, I need to pay for my rent, my food, and there isn't any job right now that I love to do. So not to get stuck on something which is said. But one may find that doing something carefully, from moment to moment, with attention given to the fingers moving, the body moving, freely, not with hatred or resentment, then maybe the doing is something like a dance. Whether it's cleaning the windows or window cleaning, that's fun, particularly when they're dirty. Somebody said that doing the dishes was the best part of the retreat. And I've never enjoyed it before. And then this person said, when somebody came to help me, immediately the thought came up, did I do something wrong? Am I not fast enough or something? But the thought was seen, and because it was seen, it didn't interfere with doing the dishes, with the fun of it. Because in such a quiet environment, one does see the soap bubbles. And one feels the water, the temperature, and the dishes. One sees something sparkling with water and the light falling on it. And it doesn't have to have a quiet atmosphere. One can also see it if the mind isn't occupied with other things, with worries, with fears, with angry remembrances. So, the last question that comes up is, having made the statement, not being afraid of dying, well, do you believe in something after death? Because it seems such an unbelievable thing to not be afraid of death without believing in something to happen later on. Future lives, paradise, whatever we all have invented to make ourselves feel a little bit at ease at the thought of ending. No, I don't believe in anything after death. I have no beliefs. I may have unconscious beliefs on which I act at times. I don't have any conscious beliefs, nor attachment to any, or yearning. There was a time in my life where I yearned for having belief to get through troublesome times, and the belief shattered. I envied people who had this strong belief that seemed to give them fortitude, endurance. I see belief as more fabrication of the brain. Whether or not we will be reborn, I'm wondering what is it that will be reborn? Because looking within and the mind quieting down, there is no within, there's nothing within. What's within is thoughts about the within. But when thoughts are not there, then there's nothing within, there's just everything what is. And thoughts are seen to be endless when they come up. And in retrospect, thinking about it, looking at history, thoughts have continued as an endless stream. In each new child, thoughts are either inculcated or born, or it already brings them with its consciousness, unconscious mind. Thoughts continue. Thoughts about me and mine and a better life in the future. Those thoughts have continued over centuries and centuries. But is there a self that has these thoughts? The self is thought. Thought continues. Self. Find it. Someone wondered about the soul in Germany. The question also came up in here. Isn't there a soul? What is it? Find it. Get in touch with it, if it's there. Find what its substance is. What is it made up of? Someone gave me a publication. I just read the first page, in which it says very clearly, Soul is of the imagery of the collective unconscious. It has nothing apart of that. And what we're wondering here is if there can be an awareness that bypasses this whole collective and individual conscious and unconscious, so that the awareness and action is fresh now. Not void of memory, accessing memory when memory comes in helpfully, and seeing where it does not come in helpfully, where it comes in divisively or destructively. It is with the diminishing of self-worry, self-concern, self-enclosure, or self-aggrandizement, with the diminishing of all of that, with the quieting down of that, that the fear of dying also quiets down. Because when the capsule doesn't encapsulate, then there's touch with the immensity, the vastness of life and death. Which has no self. It's just what it is. And that wasn't created by man or woman or the human brain, nor is it destructible by the human brain. The human brain is part of it. We will end here for today.